Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Afterlife podcast. This is your host, Pooja Chilakuri. My guest today is Bernadette Thompson. Bernadette and I met at a conference for the International Association of Near Death Studies, where she was a speaker on a panel, and her story has really deeply intrigued me, and I have been very curious to learn more. So I'm doing this interview more for myself, so I get to see her again, to talk to her again, and to ask her questions. Bernadette is an intuitive ancestral healer, spiritual and grief coach. Her powerful spiritual awakening began during a time of deep grief and trauma during her husband's illness and passing. Her ancestors came in to support her and opened her up to a higher spiritual being who is now her constant guide and companion. They have asked her to share this gift with others so they may know and understand this guidance and know that spirit communication is open to all of us. Welcome, Bernadette.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here. So happy to see you again. Just makes my heart sing.
Mine too. I love that we connected, and I actually want to stay connected. So I'm very, very glad to do this interview. And I actually want us to start with your story.
Okay. It's an amazing story, and I've been thinking about it lately as I share it with other people, and it's kind of a two-part story. So the first part of it is I have always been kind of a seeker, always interested in spiritual things. I grew up in a Catholic background, and which was wonderful. I'm not a practicing Catholic at this point, but I take a lot of the spiritual traditions with me. And so my background, that's the kind of the beginning of it. And I really didn't expect to have, I didn't really understand spiritually transformative experiences. I kind of understood what near-death experiences were because there was a lot more information about that. But looking back, I had one spiritually transformative experience when I was in my 30s. And I'm starting there just because it's just a good place to start. So I had a dear friend. We both had children that were the same age. We were preschool moms together. And then our children went off to kindergarten in different schools. So we hadn't seen each other in a little while. And I got the news that she had passed away. And it was very sudden, and there was no warning. She just didn't wake up. And I remember, and this was so difficult for me. It was hugely difficult. And I remember she was always worried about passing away early because her mom had passed away when she was 7 years old. She passed away when her daughter was 7 years old. So there's this very spiritual thing that was overwhelming to me. And I didn't know how to handle it. I didn't know what to do with those emotions. And about 2 weeks after she passed, I'm doing that mom thing, looking at early in the morning, and my daughter needed a picture of the whole family to take to school. And so I'm looking through pictures for the whole family, and suddenly a picture of Patrice came up that she had been at a birthday party of my daughter's. And in that moment, I felt Patrice come into me, and I felt her spirit saying to me I'm okay, meaning her, you're okay, meaning me, and that we're all okay. Mm-hmm. And I knew in that moment, there was the other side really was real. Mm-hmm. And it, even her, I mean, her passing was still difficult to understand, but I lost my fear of death, knowing that Patrice was on the other side. And this was somebody, I had lost grandparents at that point, but this was somebody who was young and vibrant. And so it gave me that reassurance. So then I went on to, I was raising the children, and professionally, the work that I did was I worked with middle school students. My background was psychology. And I worked with students on an alternative team who had experienced grief and trauma. These were kids that came from difficult homes and a lot of love in their families, but no skills to help them move through the world. And my job was to work with a professional mental health team to help figure out behavior things for them. How could we help them? And so that was where I was in, and I was still seeking spiritually. My parents had passed away, and I believed in signs, knowing that Patrice was over there. And I felt I was getting signs from my parents. But my life changed when my husband came to me in 2013 and said to me that he couldn't control his alcohol and that this had become an addiction. And he had always been a heavy drinker, and we had talked about it because there was alcoholism in his family, and thought that because we knew all of that he wouldn't experience it. But he did. And he really fell off the edge in that moment. We tried, we did a lot of things, but what happened was a lot of trauma and chaos over the next 4.5 years. And it was so hard that I truly went back to prayer to work through this. And another piece of the story, which is what I haven't shared, is the ancestry part. And as my whole life, but particularly as I got older, I was very interested in ancestry and had spent a lot of time doing my research on my ancestral family and a lot of other ancestral families. And during David's illness, this work that I was doing really kind of gave me an escape. Sometimes people are knitters but this was my go-to for trying, to settle myself down. And so I had to insert that because the ancestral healing part is part of my story. And so during this time, I knew a lot about my ancestors, and I had done a lot of research. And I began to pray as I was dealing with David's illness and trying to find a way to cope with everything. And I used the rosary, which was something I had done as a child. It was my, I knew how to pray the rosary. I had heard actually a medium talk about how he used the rosary as a way of meditation. And I realized that it was a good thing for me to try to use the rosary. So I did. And I began to say it often in the evening as I was trying to settle down to go to sleep. I imagined my ancestors, my female, and in particular, my female ancestors sitting around a table with me, saying the rosary with me. And that is where my bigger spiritual awakening began. So what happened was, the first thing that happened was I had a visitation. So a visitation is a dream where you are deeply connected to the spirit that's on the other side. And it was my great aunt, Sister Lou, and she came to me, and it was the two of us. It was like a Zoom, only the room was just kind of a golden yellow. And it was just she and I, and she wanted me to look at her. And I think even in my, spiritual understanding, I knew this was something different, and I didn't want to look at her. I kept looking around anywhere but looking at her. And she held my hands, and I could really feel that. She held my hands and had me look at her. And she said, "We hear your prayers." And then I woke up. And in that moment, I knew that there was help around me, and there was spiritual support around me. and that my prayers were heard, and that they were there guiding me, trying to help me on this journey. And so that was the first, real something that would, that I really recognized. And then the next thing that happened, I think it was within a month, is that I had another spiritual transformative experience that happened when I was awake, but also was associated with the rosary. And what happened there was I was saying the rosary, and anybody who has a Catholic background knows that you say the rosary out loud, like in an audible voice, not in a voice like I'm talking with you, although you could, but it's often just in a voice that you can hear, kind of like a mantra.
Yeah.
And saying the rosary too is the beads, it's very tactile. So I, again, was using the rosary, and this was right before I was going to sleep at night. And this one night, I began to say the rosary, and a channeling came through me, and I began to say the rosary in an Irish brogue. And I realized that, first of all, I was in shock, incredibly surprised, thought I was doing it. And I began to realize that I had an Irish ancestor. My lineage is all Irish, that I had an Irish ancestor that was saying the rosary through me to let me know that she was with me. And I was able the next day to open up my ancestry, my ancestral tree. And I thought it was a great somebody on my father's side. But I instantly was drawn to my great-great-grandmother on my mother's side. And I knew that it was her who was channeling through me. Mm-hmm. And she did this for months. Every time I said the rosary after this, she came in. And I couldn't do an Irish brogue for you if I tried. And even tried to say the rosary without it, because I felt that I was doing it myself. I didn't believe that this was happening. And as soon as I got to that little bit of a meditative state, she would come in. And so I knew that I truly was surrounded and being guided. And David was still alive at the time. So they were really there while I was in the middle of this very, very difficult time. And in 2017, November 1st of 2017, he passed away. And it was a difficult time, but, at that point, he was so sick. And I remember praying if he can't be healed, to bring him home. And I feel like they brought him home. Mm-hmm. And so after his passing, the ancestors stayed with me. And I continued to do not only more research on my family, but more research, for other people. And what I began to realize is that I was doing ancestral work for other people, that other ancestors began to come in and to guide me through the ancestral trees for others, as I was able to understand, because of my therapeutic background, I was able to understand that I was taking through the people through ancestral healing and guiding them to understand their family stories and the trauma and things that may have been passed down. And so the ancestors, truly, the spirits of the ancestors came into me and continue to come into me, letting me share and help others heal by helping them understand the stories of their ancestors, and by the ancestors coming in and sharing with me information that would lead me to maybe a story in the ancestry that they needed to know about, or a branch of the tree that was important for them to understand, for other people to understand. So that's kind of the first part of my story that began my spiritual awakening and my spiritually transformative experiences. And that was the beginning of my journey.
Bernadette, I listening to you. Okay, I heard you speak at the panel. I was fascinated. It's like I'm listening to you. I feel like I'm hearing everything for the first time. It's just not an everyday thing, right? And I feel like you were so open and they came in. So it makes me wonder how many of us are receiving messages, but we're just not understanding that that's what it is. And I know that some of the work you do around ancestral healing is also to help others open themselves up. Before I go there, though, because I do want to learn more about what those sessions are like, I have a question for you, and you answered it a little bit about how you received your gift, right? Your response to these experiences. Is it, given the Catholic background, and I've had a difficult religious journey too, a lot of us have been taught to be very skeptical of the spirit world.
Mm-hmm.
And for anything that comes through, right, to question it or to avoid it or to fear it. Can you speak to that a little bit?
I will. And I will speak to it, sharing the second part of my journey,
Sure.
because that is where the true opening that is with me now also began. And yes, it is. I was taught not to go near anything that was spiritually, like not to um, look for spirits, or I grew up in a generation of the Ouija board was coming out, and everybody's like, do not go, do not do, and none of that. Do not ask for to connect with spirits, because anything that you would connect with would not be might not be helpful, might not be of. So I continued on my journey, just working with my ancestral healing and with my ancestors that had been with me. And I began to feel, and the ancestors were kind of alluding it to me. I can't even put my finger on it exactly how to say it, but I felt that there may be another spirit that was coming in to guide me. And I was very cautious about opening to this. So I did a lot of reading, a lot. I chose books to read, and I allowed my inner spiritual guidance to let me know. I would start to read a book, and if it didn't feel comfortable, I would put it down. And if I read one that felt comfortable, that I felt that this was somebody who had a spiritual connection that I understood and felt comfortable with, I would continue to read. So that's a little bit of how I began. But what happened, and this is a little bit of woo-woo, which a lot of people may not be comfortable with, but I want to share it so that they understand. So I wanted to deeply connect, and I did feel like that there was somebody there. And so I had a friend, I had some friends that were very spiritual and had tried different things like, oracle cards and different types of ways to connect with spirit, safely. And one of them was using a pendulum. And I was not comfortable with that. I was really kind of fearful of that. But I decided to try it. And I bought a pendulum and I brought it home. And the way I began to use it was to surround myself with love and light, and asked for guidance, and asked that this be in the highest spiritual realm, that this was, for the highest good. So I really kind of blessed it. And the way you work with a pendulum is and I didn't even know, but you ask it, yes, show me yes, and the pendulum swung in one direction, and then ask it no, and the pendulum swung in the other direction. And I was quite surprised, even put it down, didn't want to, and went back to it. And so the next day I tried it again. And when I asked I asked it again, yes and no. And then I said, is this an angel? And they said, no. And I said, is this a guide? And they said, yes. And that began a connection with a spiritual guide who is now with me all the time. And I asked them questions to help me understand their relationship with me and to understand a little bit more, was this a real thing? And because again, when we open this door, many of us are not sure, because we come from backgrounds, religious and just in general, where we're not taught any of this. There are some spiritual traditions around the world that are taught it, that are open to connecting with spirits and ancestors and knowing that there is this loving guidance that's on the other side. And I think the way your audience will understand this is what I felt from them when I would ask questions was this loving energy coming to my body. And again, that was a way for them, I was still using the pendulum. So I was asking questions in the beginning as yes questions and no, yes and no questions. But they helped me learn. I would continue to read, and I would ask them questions about what I was reading. And was this information I was reading true? Was this something? And they would tell me yes, if they felt it was really like, yes, this is a path. But there were times that I might read something and they were like, no. And they would say no. So, and they eventually began to share with me that I didn't need this pendulum, that it was a safety thing. It was something that, and that we were actually communicating without it. They were downloading to me the answers, and I was still looking for the yes and the no's to confirm it, but they really were downloading the information. And I realized this, my daughter had shared with me that she was expecting a baby. This was to be my first grandchild. And I had gone out to the stores right around Thanksgiving, getting close to Christmas. And I went to the store, and there was this whole tray of ornaments, and one of them was an angel. And so I picked up the angel and I was looking at it. And in my head, I'm saying, I wonder if I should buy this angel, this ornament. And what came to me was yes. And that was when I realized that I could communicate without the pendulum. So that's how my journey has continued. And I am now able to receive this spiritual guidance that comes along with the ancestral connections that I'm still able to have, and to help people on their journeys seeking and understanding.
Yeah. And when I'm listening to you, Bernadette, I do have a comment. I think it's just so beautiful because a lot of the people I interview with these gifts, the thing that really blesses my heart is to hear over and over how the gift and the growth went together, kind of like hand in hand. So that makes the gift very authentic to me. Because I'm watching this person and they're saying, the gift is there, but we grew into it as well, or it grew on us, or we grew with it. So I love that you don't need that pendulum because, yeah, of course, it's about our inner empowerment, right? That's beautiful. And speaking of that, I know you work with a lot of people with grief and trauma and with the ancestral healing. So, and you alluded to it a little bit earlier, but could you just once more explain what ancestral healing is?
Yes. So ancestral healing, and we know this now, even from a scientific point of view, that our ancestors experienced grief and trauma. I mean, for all of us,
Mhm.
I don't think there are many of us or any who actually will go through our lives without experiencing it. And that when you experience grief and trauma, that behaviors change, and that trauma or those experiences can emotionally be passed down to us through our DNA and also through patterns of behavior that develop as once you experience that, you become fearful of things, and those fear reactions become really great. And those fear reactions come when we don't necessarily aren't experiencing something that should have that kind of reaction. So things that maybe we shouldn't be as fearful of, but those reactions come up. And when we talk about ancestral healing, when we look back and discover the stories of our ancestors, we see and feel their journeys. And it gives us an incredible understanding of who we are as we see some of especially the generations that are close with us. We can see and know the traumas or the experience that they went through. But we also see the triumphs, and we feel their resilience. And it gives us so much information and helps us understand that we are part of this spiritual group of ancestors that now, who are on the other side, still surround us and guide us. And when you understand your genealogy, your family trees, that you can really know more, and it's incredibly helpful. And it's helpful when you understand the traumas they may have gone through. And particularly, there are many, before families came over here to the United States or to the West, there were a lot of things that caused them to want to leave their homelands, and those things are so helpful to know. And there's just this incredible experience of feeling them and knowing them and seeing them in, just, I don't know, in everyday things. So for me, it was so helpful. I knew, so when my ancestors came in, and so when my great aunt had come through, and then when my great great grandmother, who I didn't have a lot of information on, but I knew she was part of the famine families that had come over, even she had not come. She never had left Ireland, but I knew that her family had, and who obviously I was part of, So yeah, so that's where there's so much richness and there's so much healing that happens when you are experiencing grief and trauma in your life. And it is helpful to you and it is helpful for you to understand both your grief reactions and your trauma reactions as you are going through them yourself. It helped me so much when I lost David, when I lost my husband, to know that others had gone through it. My ancestors had gone through it, and I was experiencing their resilience and their triumphs. So it was amazing. Yeah, it is amazing.
It's very reassuring, very comforting. Yes, for sure. So I have a question for you. When you're working with people that have been going through grief and trauma, and so you're getting like the messages from their ancestors, right? And then you're helping them. How do you protect? I don't like to use the word protect, but I don't know what else word to use. But how do you self-care for your energy? Because you've been through grief as well. So, I can only imagine when you're working with people going through grief, does that trigger your own? How do you self-care for that?
That is a wonderful, wonderful question. My professional experience has taught me a tremendous amount about grief and trauma. And a lot of trainings and working with people, giving me the ability to hold it without allowing it to come into me. So I am able to recognize it. I recognize trauma responses. I can recognize the grief, and I'm able to hold it because I know that the healing that can happen is so powerful, that I think that is what guides me and allows me to deeply want to help other people. And spirit is with me, so they are also protecting me as well. So they have helped me through my grief and my trauma, and they've helped me open to forgiveness and non-judgment and all of those beautiful compassion, all of those beautiful things. And so it is truly what I'm able to share with others. It helps others also to have that connection with me, that I know what they're going through.
Mhm.
And that I came through. I call it growing through grief and trauma. We will always have that, but it doesn't mean that we can't leave it. I often think when I talk about this, is something I share when I'm doing the ancestry as well, is that the trees, the family trees, holds the trauma that they went through, and we don't have to carry that with us, but we can look back and appreciate and understand and get guidance or healing from it, but that knowing that we can put it back there and come back into this life and live the life and grow and vision a life that we know our ancestors and our spirit guides and source, whatever source means, that they are here and wanting us to grow through this life.
And I think it's a very beautiful, the whole process is very beautiful. I've actually went to your website and signed up for your newsletter. And one of the things that I downloaded for free, which I highly recommend, I'm going to do a shameless plug for it. You have a little worksheet to get us jump started on this journey of, being able to gather the story of our ancestors. I think it's so precious. So, do you just want to speak to that a little bit? Like one or two things that we could do to just get started?
Yes, yes. And the getting started, I love that. The getting started is allowing you, the work that I do is wanting you to take the ancestry and then open up spiritually, knowing that that spiritual guidance is there. And looking back at your ancestry is to think of the stories that may have been shared, to write down those things, to look for um, uh, things that may have been passed down. Pieces of furniture can sometimes tell the story. Anything that you have had passed down to you, whether it's been written, photographs, those all begin to help you understand the story. And I can help you in that way if that is something that you would be interested, to help you build a family tree. But even in your own little research, looking at their stories, you will begin to understand what has been passed down to you, and to see some of the remarkable things that your ancestors have come through, as you look back and see what has been left to you. And if nothing has been left to you, I don't want you to worry about that, because there are ways. There is so much information out there now, that there are ways to find information about your family that you may not even know. And there are definitely ways to discover that. And I also just want to share that it is to bring that opening up, because the ancestral energy that is around us, as is that layer of our loved ones who have recently crossed, they are closest to us energetically. And I want you to think of it a little bit in a layer, that they are layers, and that sometimes we talk about it when people have asked me about ascension, but it is that layer that is right above us, the ancestors and our loved ones, they are so close to us, which is why they came to me when I was in my own difficulty, and to let me know. So it is those who have passed that maybe and those ancestors that maybe you don't know. And there's more. So I want to help you to open up to a deeper spiritual understanding, and take it at your own pace. You talked in the beginning a little bit about how many of us are fearful about taking this journey, and being told not to, and wanting, thinking or understanding a little bit more, but still feeling like I can't do this. This is something I've been told is not okay. And I want you to know that you can do this one step at a time. And just looking at your ancestry is a very safe way to understand the stories that are there and make a connection that, even if you aren't ready to connect to the other side, you are ready to learn those stories that give you a spiritual sense of yourself.
That's really well said, Bernadette. And I actually want to say thank you for having the courage to receive your gifts and then to share them. Because that takes courage. It really does. Because, like we said, speaking about the spirit world, that isn't very everyday conversations, right? So thank you. Thank you. And on that note, before we get to a close, I do want to ask you for some thoughts you have for anyone that's listening right now that may be going through grief or loss. If there are any words that you would like to share with them.
I would love to share with them that I understand and I hold them here, knowing that their loved ones, their ancestors, their angels and guides are there, that are around them. And the fact that they are here listening to you and listening to me means that they are on a path to healing, and to allow themselves to take any little baby steps that make them feel comfortable, and allow them to know that when they hit that wall, and where there's kind of two walls. One wall is that I just want to go back in and sit with my grief, that's okay. And we all grieve whatever it is the loss is, whether it's a loved one or something dramatic that has happened in our lifetime. And it is okay to go back and feel those feelings, and then to allow yourself to come out again, and to come listen to another podcast, to do something like that. And then as you are opening, when you reach that point and you go, wait a minute, did I go a little too far? Again, allow yourself to come back. And so this is all your journey. You do not have to follow anyone. It is a personal journey between you and your higher power, whatever source or God or whatever it is that you feel close to. That is who is guiding you. And anything that I share with you is to help you open to that, so you don't need me or anyone else to help you in that journey.
Thank you. And if someone wants to work with you, what is the best way that they can connect with you?
The best way, I have a website, which is my company is Tell Me Our Story Ancestral Healing. And the website is tellmeourstory.com. And it is from the point of view of the child asking the parent to tell me our story. like, what is our story? What, because we all often have that wonder of where we came from and who are we. And I am on many social media. You can find me on Facebook and Tell Me Our Story. Ancestral Healing is there. I am also, I have often have little videos on YouTube. And it, again, if you put in Tell Me Our Story, put in Bernadette Thompson, Tell Me Our Story, and I will come up. And I often put little videos out just, every couple of days, just so you can hear something new and just help you along your day. And but again, if going to the website, signing up, I do ancestral healing, shorter things. I help people build their trees, and I also have a 30-minute free session for those that need to just know some more before they get started. So all of those things, and again, the download that you were talking about.
I love getting your newsletter, Bernadette.
Yeah.
So I'm definitely going to put in a plug for that. The newsletter is very valuable.
And I'd like to share, this is a very special story that I'd like to share about the guidance that I've received. And I kind of like to end with it because I want people to know how deeply loved and guided that they are.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is a story about the kind of the last part of my journey that I think your audience would be interested. When my husband passed away, I came from a big family, and my oldest sister and I had been pretty close in our lives. But during that time, there was so much chaos, and our relationship kind of broke apart. I think as the oldest, she had been given the job of caring for us many times. There were 8 children that she had been responsible for helping everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And I think she just was so, she knew this was so difficult, and she just needed to separate a little bit from me.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt hurt by it, and I didn't know how to deal with this. And I had been working with my guide, reading things and a lot about forgiveness and compassion, as I shared before. Mm-hmm. And so this one evening, we were sharing things and working with the forgiveness. And they shared with me that I had risen to a level of higher forgiveness. And I said, because I forgave David, my husband, because of, and they said, no, because I thought because of, his illness. And I said, is it because I forgave my sister? And they said, yes. And about a half hour later, my brother called and shared with me that my sister had passed away. And I know this is a sad story, but I asked them, I said, did you share that with me so that I knew I had forgiven her before she had passed away? And they said, yes. And it changed my life in terms of knowing how deeply loved and cared for. So I don't want your audience to be afraid on this journey. It doesn't happen quickly. I mean, it does happen quickly for those sometimes who have had NDEs, but for some of us, it doesn't. And I just want you to know how deeply loved and guided that you are.
Thank you for sharing that, Bernadette. It's invaluable to have that kind of closure. So thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you for sharing your story with us. And thank you for joining us today. I wish you the very best. Thank you.
I can't wait to come back and be with you and your friends, your listeners again.
Thank you.